In the farthest edge of the known galaxy where stars grew thin and time moved like slow breath, the citadel of Valthar hung suspended above a dying blue sun, its towers carved from living crystal that pulsed with soft inner light like the heartbeat of a sleeping god. The air inside shimmered with ancient energy and silence, ruled every corridor, for the one who lived at its center had not spoken in over 300 years. Princess Elira of the Starlit Spire walked alone through the high balconies of her home, her silver robes trailing behind her like strands of moonlight caught in wind. She moved without sound. Her bare feet never disturbing the glassy floor beneath. Her long white hair flowed past her waist, and her eyes held colors no painter could name, deep violet edged with gold like twin galaxies caught in eternal orbit. She was tall and slender, built not for war, but for grace. Yet every noble house in the Alliance feared her, not for her power, but for her silence. Suitors had come from every corner of the spiral arm, men and women of high blood and greater ambition. They arrived in ships of polished obsidian or living wood or molten gold, each bearing gifts meant to sway a heart they assumed was merely waiting to be claimed. One brought a necklace forged from the core of a dead star. Another offered a planet newly terraformed with oceans of liquid sapphire. A third knelt for 7 days without food or water. Just to prove his devotion, Elira turned them all away, never uttering a word, never even glancing at their faces. She simply stood at the edge of the balcony until they left, ashamed or angry or broken. Her only companion was Kor the dragon, who coiled around the central spire like a living shadow. Kor was not like the beasts of myth. He did not breathe fire or hoard treasure. His scales were smooth and black as void space, and his eyes glowed with a soft silver light that changed with his mood. He communicated not through sound, but through pulses of feeling that brushed against the mind like whispers in a dream. Elira understood him perfectly, and he her. They had been together since she was a child, found alone in the ruins of a forgotten moon with no memory of her parents. Only the dragon curled protectively around her small frame. One knew what Elira truly was. The elders called her Elven. But her blood ran colder than any elf they had ever met, and her bones hummed with energy that bent light around her. Some whispered she was not born at all, but crafted by the first architects of the universe to guard something too dangerous to be named. Others believed she was the last of an extinct race older than stars themselves. Whatever the truth, she remained apart, untouched by time, untouched by love, untouched by war, until the Crithian armada arrived. They came without warning, their warships dark and jagged like shards of broken sky, tearing through the outer rim defenses as if they were made of paper. The Crithians were conquerors by nature. Their empire stretched across 7 sectors, and their hunger for new worlds never ceased. But Valthar was different. It held no resources, no armies, no trade routes, only silence and beauty and mystery. Yet Prince Dayan, the heir to the Crithian throne, had set his eyes on Elira years ago, and now he would have her by force if not by choice. Alarms rang through the citadel, not with sound, but with shifting colors in the walls, a deep red that pulsed like a wound. The court gathered in the grand hall, their faces pale with fear. They wore robes of emerald and gold and carried ceremonial blades they would never use. They argued in hushed voices about surrender or evacuation or last stands, but none dared approach the balcony where Elira stood, watching the enemy fleet gather like storm clouds on the horizon. Kor stirred from his perch, his tail uncoiling slowly, his wings flexing once, sending ripples through the air around him. He sent a wave of calm toward Elira, but beneath it lay a thread of warning. The Crithians were not here for negotiation. They had brought planet crackers and neural lances, weapons designed to break minds as easily as cities. Still, Elira gave no command. She did not call for shields to rise or cannons to charge. She did not summon the ancient guardians buried beneath the citadel's foundations. She simply watched as the first bombardment struck the outer atmosphere. The sky flared white, then red, then black again. The citadel shuddered but held its crystal, walls absorbing the energy and storing it like breath in the lower levels. Panic spread, engineers scrambled to reinforce failing systems. Diplomats sent frantic messages to allied worlds but received only silence. The Crithians had cut all lines of communication. Valthar was alone. Yet Elira remained still. Her hands rested lightly on the balcony rail, her expression unreadable, her eyes fixed on the largest ship in the fleet, the royal dreadnought bearing Prince Daeon's sigil, a serpent coiled. Around a dying star she remembered him vaguely from years past. A handsome figure with sharp eyes and sharper words. He had come twice before offering marriage treaties and shared rule. Both times she had turned away without a glance. Now he returned. With guns instead of gifts, Kor moved beside her, his massive head lowering until it rested near her shoulder. His warmth a quiet comfort in the cold air. He sent another pulse not of fear but of readiness. He would fight if she asked, he would burn the sky if she willed it. But Illyra did not ask. Instead she closed her eyes and listened. Beneath the roar of engines and the crackle of energy shields, she heard something else faint but growing stronger. A hum not of machines, but of something alive, something small and broken and humana, ship not Crithian, not Velthari, not any known design. It tumbled through the upper atmosphere, trailing smoke and sparks. Its hull scorched black, its engines dead. It was small, barely larger than a shuttle, and it carried no weapons, no markings, no hope. Yet it was coming straight for Velthar. The Citadel's defenses should have vaporized it on sight, but something in its signal confused the ancient systems. It broadcast no threat, yet carried a frequency that resonated with the Citadel's core. A frequency no one had heard in millennia. Illyra opened her eyes. For the first time in centuries, something had surprised her. The ship broke through the final shield layer with a scream of tearing metal and plunged toward the lower gardens where the memory trees grew their silver leaves, recording every moment of Velthar's history in silent song. It crashed not with an explosion but with a heavy thud, sending up a cloud of glowing pollen that drifted, like snow in the wind. Kor lifted his head, his ears twitching, his eyes narrowing. Illyra took a single step forward, then another. She did not run. She did not speak. She simply moved toward the crash site, her robes flowing behind her like liquid starlight. The court watched from below, too afraid to follow, too stunned to stop her as she descended the spiral stairs that wound around the central spire. The bombardment paused as if the Crithians sensed a shift in the air. Even Prince Daen held his fire for a moment, curious. In the garden, the ship lay half buried in soft earth, steam rising from its cracked hull. A hatch groaned open and a figure stumbled out, coughing blood and soot coating her face. She was human, small and lean with short brown hair. Matted with sweat and grime, her uniform was torn and bore the faded insignia of a forgotten fleet Earth 7th. She leaned against the wreckage, her legs shaking, but her eyes sharp, scanning the surroundings. Not with fear, but with wonder. Saw the memory trees, their leaves shimmering with recorded light. She saw the crystal walls breathing with soft pulses. She saw the dragon watching her from the shadows, and she did not flinch. Most would have screamed or begged or fired a weapon. She simply whispered, "Wow." Kor tilted his head, his silver eyes studying her. The human looked up and met Illyra's gaze. For a long moment neither moved. Then the human smiled faintly and said, "You must be Illyra, no?" One had spoken her name in decades. No one had dared. Illyra did not answer, but she did not turn away. And in that silence something began to change. The stars above dimmed as if holding their breath. The war outside paused, and the heart of the princess of the starlit spire beat once louder than it had in 300 years. The human stood unsteady on her feet, but her eyes held no fear, only a quiet awe that made Kor tilt his head again, his silver gaze softening slightly. Illyra remained still at the edge of the garden, her expression unreadable, but her fingers curled. Slightly against the fabric of her robe, something in the human's voice had stirred a memory. Long buried, a voice like wind through dry grass. Simple, honest, real. The human took a slow step forward, then winced, clutching her side. Blood seeped through her torn uniform. She did not ask for help. She did not demand anything. She simply looked around the garden as if she had stumbled into a dream. The memory trees swayed gently, their silver leaves chiming like distant bells. The air smelled of ozone and blooming starflowers, and beneath it all hummed the low thrum of the Citadel's Illyra. Watched her carefully, Kor moved first. Stepping slowly from the shadows, his massive form gliding over the ground without sound. The human froze, but did not retreat. She met the dragon's eyes and held them, a strange calm passing between them. Then Kor lowered his head and nudged her gently toward a patch of moss that glowed faintly blue. The moss was known to heal minor wounds and ease pain. The court had used it for centuries, but never had Kor guided a stranger to it. The human blinked, then smiled. "Thank you," she whispered, and sank onto the moss with a soft sigh. Lyra took another step forward, then stopped just out of arm's reach. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice soft like distant thunder. The first words she had spoken in over 300 years, the sound startled even her. The human looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes, then warmth. "I am Lyra McKinney," she said simply. "Scout. From Earth's 7th Fleet, we were tracking a signal, an old one from before the Great Silence. It led us here, Earth." Lyra repeated the name, unfamiliar, yet not unknown. The humans were considered primitive, barely spacefaring their ships, slow their weapons crude, their worlds scattered and broken after the Crithian raids decades ago. Most high races dismissed them as irrelevant noise in the galactic chorus. Yet here one stood in the heart of Vaelthar, bleeding and breathing, and Lyra reached into a hidden pocket of her uniform and pulled out a small object no larger than her palm. It was dull gray and cracked, but as she held it up, the citadel responded. The crystal walls pulsed brighter. The memory trees chimed louder, and Kor let out a low hum of recognition. "It is a fragment," she said, "of the resonance key." Lyra's breath caught. The resonance key was not a myth. It was the heart of the Guardian Arrays, ancient machines built by the first architects to protect the young races of the galaxy. When the architects vanished, they left the key hidden in pieces across the stars, each piece attuned to a specific bloodline or species. The final piece was said to be held by the last Guardian, the one bound to Vaelthar. Lyra had searched for it for centuries, believing it lost forever, and now a human held it. "How did you find this?" Lyra asked gently, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. Ra smiled faintly. "We did not find it. It found us during the last Crithian attack on Mars. Our command bunker collapsed and this thing lit up like a star. It led me through the ruins, then into deep space. I followed it for months, jumping from dead station to dead station until the signal pointed here." Lyra stared at her, the weight of centuries pressing down on her chest. Humans were not supposed to survive that kind of journey. Their bodies too fragile, their ships too weak. Yet Lyra stood before her, alive, stubborn, and full of quiet fire. Kor moved closer, circling Lyra once, then lying down beside her, his tail curling around her like a shield. Lyra did not understand why the dragon trusted her so quickly, but she felt it too, a strange pull, a sense that this human was not an accident. Outside the citadel, the Crithian fleet stirred again, engines roaring to life. Prince Dain had grown impatient. Lyra turned toward the sky, her expression hardeningly. Ra struggled to her feet despite the pain in her side. "What is happening?" she asked. "War," she said simply. But before Lyra could respond, alarms rippled through the citadel, not with sound but with shifting light. The outer shields flickered under renewed bombardment, this time heavier, more focused. The Crithians were testing weaknesses. Lyra moved toward the central spire without another word. Lyra hesitated, then followed. The court watched from the grand hall, their faces tight with fear when they saw the human limping behind the princess. They gasped. Some stepped forward to block her path, but Kor growled low in his throat, a sound that vibrated through the floor and sent them stumbling back, inside the command chamber. The walls were alive with shifting symbols, maps of the fleet positions, energy flows, shield integrity, all written in light. Lyra stood before the main console, her hands hovering over the surface but not touching it. She did not need to. The citadel responded to her thoughts alone, but the systems were failing faster than expected. The bombardment was targeting harmonic nodes, critical points where the citadel's energy converged. If those fell, the entire structure would destabilize. Ra stepped forward, ignoring the stares of the nobles. She studied the symbols, not understanding the language but recognizing patterns from her own ship's systems. "You are losing feedback in the tertiary ring," she said, pointing to a dimming section of the wall. Lyra turned to her surprisedly. Ra met her gaze. "We had the same problem on the Persephone when our core started misfiring. We rerouted through the lateral harmonics it bought us. Lyra frowned, then tilted her head slightly. Try it. Lyra approached the console and placed her hand on a smooth panel. The Citadel resisted at first, then recognized the resonance key still clutched in her other hand. The symbols shifted, rearranged, and a new path of energy lit up bright and steady. The room fell silent. The tertiary ring stabilized. The nobles stared at Lyra as if she had performed magic. Lyra looked at her, not with gratitude but with something deeper recognition. Over the next hours, Lyra worked tirelessly, moving through the lower levels with engineers who barely understood her words, but followed her gestures. She used scraps from her crashed ship wires from old consoles, even pieces of her own uniform, to patch failing systems. She spoke in simple terms, no jargon, no arrogance, just clear, direct instructions, and to everyone's surprise it worked. Kor stayed close, never leaving her side. Lyra watched from above her usual perch on the high balcony, but now her eyes followed Lyra, not the stars that night. As the bombardment paused for repairs, Lyra sat in the garden wrapped in a borrowed robe. Her wounds cleaned, her exhaustion plain on her face. Yet she smiled as she watched the memory trees, their leaves glowing. With soft light, Lyra appeared beside her, silent as always. "Why did you come here?" Lyra asked, not looking at her, just curious. Lyra did not answer right away. Then she said, "I was waiting." "For what? For something real?" Lyra nodded as if that made perfect sense. "You are not like the others," she said softly. "They wanted your power, your title, your blood. They just see you." Lyra looked at her. Then for the first time in centuries, she sat down beside someone. The air between them hummed, not with energy, but with something quieter, something human. Kor curled around them both, his warmth wrapping them in silence. Above the Citadel, the stars burned cold and distant. But below in the garden, something new began to grow. A trust, a hope. A spark that would soon ignite a war, not just of ships and weapons, but of hearts and choices. And far away in his dreadnought, Prince Dane watched the Citadel's energy stabilize through his scanners and frowned. No one had ever repaired Vaelthar's systems so quickly, not even his best engineers. "Who is she?" he muttered to himself, and for the first time he felt not confidence but doubt. Meanwhile, Lyra leaned her head back and closed her eyes. Lyra watched her sleep, and for the first time in 300 years, she did not feel alone. Days passed and the siege held, but Vaelthar no longer felt like a tomb. It breathed again with purpose and motion. Lyra moved through the Citadel like a quiet storm, fixing what was broken, teaching what she knew, listening more than she spoke. The Vaelthari engineers watched her at first with doubt, then with awe, as she rerouted power through harmonic feedback loops. A trick humans had learned fighting in the asteroid belts where every spark of energy mattered. She used old ship parts, scraps of wire, even pieces of her own uniform to patch failing nodes. And each time the Citadel responded brighter, stronger, steadier. Lyra watched from a distance at first, then closer each day until she walked beside Lyra through the lower corridors, her silver robes brushing against Lyra's patched uniform, their steps falling into rhythm without words. Kor followed behind his massive form, casting a long shadow, but his presence was calm, his silver eyes watching over them both like a silent guardian. The court whispered among themselves. Some called Lyra a spy, others a miracle, but none dared speak against her. Not after she saved the eastern shield node from collapse with nothing but a coil of copper and a steady hand one evening as twin moons rose over the Citadel, casting silver light across the gardens. Lyra sat beneath the oldest memory tree, its leaves shimmering with centuries of recorded moments. Lyra joined her, not with ceremony, but with quiet steps. She sat on the moss beside her, their shoulders almost touching. "You never talk about Earth," Lyra said softly. Lyra looked at her. "There is little to tell. It is gone. Not all of it," Lyra said. "Some of us are still out there, scattered but alive." Lyra studied her face, the lines of exhaustion, the stubborn set of her jaw, the warmth in her eyes that never dimmed even in shadow. "Why did you come alone?" "Because no one else could," Lyra said simply. "The others are fighting just to survive. I had to find the key. I had to try." Lyra was silent for a long time, then she said, "The resonance key is not just a tool, it is a promise." "What kind of promise?" To protect the young races until they are strong enough to protect themselves. The Guardian arrays were built for that purpose, but they have been silent for thousands of years, Lyra nodded. Then why are they silent? Because the last Guardian broke her oath. Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. I am bound to this place. I cannot leave, I cannot fight beyond these walls. If I do, the Citadel will fall. And with it the last hope of reactivating the arrays. Lyra looked at her not with pity but with understanding. Then she reached out and took Lyra's hand. Her touch was warm, rough from work, but gentle. Maybe the oath was never meant to be forever. Maybe it was waiting for someone to remind you that you are not just a Guardian. You are also a person. Lyra did not pull away. The contact sent a ripple through her like a stone dropped in still water. For the first time she felt something unfamiliar, not duty, not silence, but longing. Kor lifted his head from where he lay nearby and let out a soft hum. The air around them shimmered faintly as if the stars themselves were listening. That night they stayed in the garden long after the moon set, talking not of war or keys or oaths, but of small things. Lyra spoke of Earth's oceans and forests and the taste of real apples. Lyra spoke of the first time she saw a nebula bloom and how the memory trees sang when a new life was born in the Citadel. And when Lyra's hand brushed against hers again, something shifted, not just between them but in the sky above. The stars flickered in unison like a single breath held and released. The next morning the Citadel's core pulsed stronger than it had in centuries. But peace never lasts. News came from the outer sensors. A single Crithian vessel approached, not a warship, but a sleek diplomatic cruiser bearing Prince Dane's personal sigil. It requested entry under truce banner. The court erupted in debate. Some demanded refusal. Others saw opportunity, but Lyra stood silent at the balcony, her eyes narrowed. Let him come, she said finally. Lyra frowned but did not argue. When Prince Dane stepped onto the Citadel's main platform, he was as polished as ever, his armor gleaming, his smile perfect, his words smooth. He bowed deeply to Lyra, his voice rich with practiced charm. Princess, I come not as an enemy but as a suitor, one who has defied his own empire to protect you. The court murmured. In surprise, Dane turned to Lyra, his smile not reaching his eyes. And you must be the human scout. How brave of you to travel. So far Lyra nodded but said nothing. Dane continued, I have ordered my fleet to hold fire. I wish only to speak with you, Lyra, to offer you a choice, not conquest but partnership. Lyra studied him, then said, why now? Because I see what others do not, he said, stepping closer. You are not just a relic of the past. You are the future, and I would stand beside you, not against you. His words were beautiful, but Kor growled low in his throat, a sound only Lyra and Lyra heard. That night, as the Citadel prepared for the prince's stay, Lyra worked in the lower engine room, checking the new harmonic lines she had installed. She paused when she saw something odd, a faint residue on a conduit, not from her ship, not from Valthari systems. It was human-made, but not from her fleet. She followed the trace to a hidden storage bay and found discarded armor plating, Crithian-made but stained, with human blood and scorched with earth-made munitions. Her blood ran cold. She rushed to Lyra, who stood on the balcony watching the prince's ship. He is lying, she said quietly. He did not come to protect you. He came to finish what he started. Lyra turned to her. How do you know? Lyra showed her the evidence, the blood, the munitions, the mismatched tech. He has been attacking human colonies, using our weapons to frame us or weaken us. I saw the same marks on Lyra's eyes darkened. Before she could respond, an alarm pulsed through the Citadel, not red but gold. A ceremonial alert. Prince Dane had requested a trial of worthiness. He stood in the grand hall before the court, his voice ringing with false honor. I have heard much of this human's skill. Let her prove she is worthy of the princess's ear in the dueling ring. If she wins, I will withdraw my fleet. If she loses, she leaves Valthar forever. The court gasped. Lyra knew she could refuse, but tradition bound her. The trial was ancient and sacred. To deny it would shame the Citadels. She looked at Lyra. Lyra met her gaze and nodded. I will do it. The dueling ring was a circular platform suspended above the Citadel's core, open to the sky with no shields, no weapons allowed, only skill, And when Lyra entered wearing only her patched uniform, Dane wore light ceremonial armor that gleamed under the twin suns. They bowed. The trial began. But Dane did not fight fairly as the match progressed. He activated a hidden neural disruptor built into his gauntlet, a device meant to scramble the mind and paralyze the body. Lyra staggered, her vision blurring, her limbs heavy. Kor roared and lunged forward, but the ring's field held him back. Lyra watched helpless, bound by the rules of the trial, but then Lyra did something unexpected. She dropped to one knee, not in surrender but in focus. She placed her palm on the ring's surface and channeled the resonance key's frequency through her body. The citadel responded. The platform flared with light and the disruptor shorted out in Dane's hand. He stared at her in shock. "You cannot win," she said, rising slowly. "Because you do not understand what this place truly is." Enraged, Dane drew a hidden blade. Lyra moved. She shattered the arena's energy, dome with a scream that cracked the sky. Light exploded outward, shaking the citadel to its foundation. Dane was thrown back, his blade clattering to the ground. Kor broke through the barrier and stood over Lyra, his eyes blazing. Lyra descended the steps, her voice cold and clear. "You came not for peace but for control. You used human blood to fuel your war, and now you dare stand in this sacred place and lie to my face." Dane scrambled to his feet, his mask of charm gone, replaced by fury. "You think a human can save you, Lyra? You are a relic and she is nothing." Lyra looked at Lyra, then back at Dane. "She is everything." With a wave of her hand, she banished him from the citadel, his ship forced away by the awakened defenses. As the court stood in stunned silence, Lyra swayed on her feet. Lyra caught her before she fell. In that moment, no one spoke, no one moved. The truth was clear. The war was not just outside, it was here, and the heart of the princess had chosen its side. The citadel trembled, not from bombardment but from something deeper, a shift in its core, like a slumbering giant stirring after centuries of stillness. Lyra held Lyra close as the last echoes of her scream faded into the sky. The air smelled of ozone and scorched metal and something else, something ancient waking up. The court stood frozen, not in fear but in awe, for they had never seen their princess act, not out of duty, but out of feelingly. Lyra leaned against her, breathing hard, her body weak from the neural disruptor but her eyes clear and steady. She looked up at Lyra and gave a small nod. "I am okay," she whispered. Lyra did not let go. Kor circled them both, his silver eyes scanning the skies. Prince Daen's ship had been pushed beyond the outer shields, but his fleet still waited like wolves at the edge of a fire. They would not leave. Not now. Not after this humiliation. Back in the command chamber, the mood was grim. The trial had broken more than just tradition. It had exposed the truth. The Crithians were not just after Valthar. They had been using human colonies as testing grounds for weapons meant to break the Citadel's defenses. And Daen had played both sides, pretending to court Lyra while burning Earth's last outpost. Lyra sat on a low bench while Valthari healers tended to her wounds. She refused to lie down, insisted on staying alert, her mind already working through the new threat. "They will attack soon," she said, her voice low but firm. "Daen will not return to his father. Empty-handed, he will bring everything." Lyra stood by the main console, her fingers tracing the flickering symbols on the wall. The Citadel's energy was unstable. The dome shatter had drained reserves faster than expected, and the harmonic nodes were straining under the constant pressure of the siege. "How long can we hold?" she asked. "Not long," Lyra said. "Unless we do something, they are waiting for us to weaken, and then they will hit the core directly." Lyra turned to her. "What do you suggest?" Lyra looked at the resonance key still clutched in her hand, then at the Citadel's central column glowing faintly in the center of the room. "The key is not just a switch," she said. "It is a bridge. If we can link it to the Citadel's core and then to the Guardian arrays, we might be able to wake them up." Lyra frowned. "The arrays are scattered across the galaxy. They have not responded in millennia. Maybe they were waiting for a human voice." Lyra said simply, "We are not like the others. We do not ask for power, we ask for a chance." Kor let out a soft hum as if in agreement. Lyra studied Lyra's face, the determination, the quiet fire, the way she spoke not of victory but of hope. And in that moment, Lyra made her choice. We will try through. The night they worked together, Lyra guiding the engineers with simple, clear instructions while Elira channeled her own energy into the core to stabilize it. The Citadel responded to both of them now. Not just to Elira's bloodline, but to Lyra's presence, as if the resonance key had opened a door that had been locked for too long. Be dawn, the link was ready. A thin thread of energy connecting the key to the central column, humming with potential. But it was not enough. They needed a catalyst, something to amplify the signal across light years. Kor stepped forward, then his massive form glowing faintly with stored stellar energy. He had been absorbing energy from the bombardments for days, storing it in his scales like a living battery. Elira understood what he offered. No, she said softly. Kor lowered his head and nudged her hand, his eyes steady, his mind clear. This was his choice tool. He replaced a hand on his snout. Thank you, she whispered. Outside, the sky darkened as the Crithian fleet moved into final position, thousands of ships forming a ring around Velthar, their weapons charging, their engines roaring like thunder. Prince Dain's voice echoed through the comms. Not as a suitor now, but as a conqueror. Princess Elira, you have one last chance. Surrender or be erased from history. Elira stood on the main balcony, Lyra beside her, Kor at their backs. The wind tugged at their clothes, the air thick with tension. She did not answer. Instead, she raised the resonance key high and spoke not to Dain but to the stars. Awaken. The Citadel flared with light so bright it turned night into day. The core surged. The harmonic nodes sang and Kor launched himself into the sky, his body blazing with stored energy like a comet made of shadow and starlight. The Crithian fleet fired beams of plasma and neural lances tore through the atmosphere, but Kor met them head-on, his wings spreading wide, absorbing the blasts and channeling them into the resonance signal. The key glowed white-hot in Elira's hand, and the signal shot outward, not as a whisper but as a roar. Across the galaxy, dormant machines stirred. On dead moons, buried warframes powered up their optics, flickering to life. In asteroid belts, ancient cannons turned toward the sky. On forgotten worlds, shield generators hummed back online. And on the scattered human colonies, radios crackled to life with a single repeating tone. Not a message, but a Calorth's survivors looked up, and for the first time in decades, they felt hope back at Velthar. The Crithian fleet faltered, their systems glitching as the awakened Guardian arrays began to interfere with their signals. Ships collided, confused their targeting systems. Scrambled, Dain's dreadnought tried to retreat, but a beam of pure harmonic energy lanced from a newly awakened station near Proxima and tore through its hull. The siege was breaking, but Velthar was breaking too. The strain of channeling so much power had cracked the Citadel's foundations. The crystal towers groaned. The memory trees dimmed, and Elira fell to her knees, blood trickling from her nose. Her body pushed beyond its limits. Lyra caught her hold on. She said, her voice fierce, "I cannot hold it much longer." Elira whispered the oath, the Citadel. "It is tied to me. If I let go, it will fall." "Then do not let go," Lyra said. "Take my hand." Elira looked at her confused. "The key responds to me because I am human," Lyra said, "but it responds to you because you are the Guardian. Together, we are stronger than either alone." Elira understood. She took Lyra's hand, and the Citadel sang not with pain but with harmony. Human and elven energy merging into something new, something whole. The cracks in the towers sealed the memory. Trees blazed with light, and the core pulsed like a living heart. Core returned from the sky, landing gently beside them. His scales dimmed, but his eyes bright with triumph. The Crithian fleet was in full retreat. Their formation shattered, their morale broken, but the victory was not just in the battle. It was in the choice. Elira looked at Lyra, her eyes no longer distant but full of something warm and real. "I thought I was bound to this place forever," she said. "You were," Lyra said softly, "but not alone anymore." And in that moment, the stars above burned not with cold fire but with promise. The war was not over, but for the first time in centuries, Velthar was not just a fortress, it was a home. The silence after the battle was deeper than any that had come before. It was not the silence of emptiness, but of breath held in awe. The sky above Velthar cleared of warships. The stars returned to their quiet watch, and the Citadel stood whole, not because it had survived, but because it had changed. Its crystal walls now shimmered with a soft golden hue. a blend of elven resonance and human will. The memory trees sang not just of the past but of something new, something alive. Elira sat on the edge of the high balcony, her silver robe still stained with dust and dried blood, but her posture no longer rigid. She leaned slightly against Lyra, who sat beside her, one arm wrapped loosely around her shoulders. Neither spoke. They did not. Need to the weight of what they had done settled between them like a shared heartbeat. Kor lay coiled at their feet, his scales dull but his eyes bright. He had given much of his stored energy to the final surge, and now rested like a shadow made, gentle by dawn. Below the citadel, the court moved with purpose, no longer whispering in fear, but working with quiet determination. Engineers repaired the last damaged nodes, healers tended to the few wounded, and messengers sent coded pulses to the newly awakened guardian stations across the galaxy. Each signal carried not just data but hope, but Elira knew the war was not truly over. The Crithian Empire was vast, and Prince Dane, though defeated, would not be the last to seek Velthar's power. Others would come, drawn by rumors of the awakened arrays or the mysterious human who stood beside the silent princess. Yet for the first time, she did not feel dread. She felt readily. Ra stirred beside her, her voice soft but clear. "We should send a message to the colonies." Elira turned to her. "They need to know they are not alone," Lyra said. "Earth has been fighting in the dark for so long. If they see the arrays are active, if they know someone is watching over them, they will stand taller." Lyra nodded, and together they walked to the command chamber. The console now responded to both of them, symbols shifting at their combined touch. They crafted a simple signal, not words but a tone, a pulse that carried the resonance key's frequency and the Citadel's signature. Then they sent it outward on every open channel. Within hours, replies began to trickle in, faint at first, then stronger, scattered human outposts from Titan to Ceres to the ruins of Mars, all echoing back with the same tone. A chain of light across the dark core lifted his head at each new signal, his tail flicking gently as if counting them. Meanwhile, the court watched Elira and Lyra with new eyes, no longer seeing a human intruder, but a partner, a spark that had reignited their world one evening as the twin moons rose again. Elira led Lyra to the heart chamber deep beneath the citadel, a place no outsider had ever seen. The walls here were not crystal but living stone veined with light, and at the center floated a sphere of pure energy, the last remnant of the architects who built Velthar. "This is where my oath was made," Elira said, her voice quiet. "I was bound here as a child, told I could never leave, never love, never choose." Ra looked at her, then at the sphere, then back at her, eyes steady. "You are choosing." No. Elira reached out and took her hand, then placed their joined hands against the sphere. Light flared, not blinding but warm, and the sphere dimmed. The oath was broken, not by force but by truth. Elira gasped. As centuries of weight lifted from her shoulders, she swayed and Lyra caught her. "Are you okay?" "Yes," she whispered, "more than okay." For the first time she was free, not just to fight but to live. In the days that followed, changes came quickly. Elira no longer stood apart. She walked the corridors with Lyra, spoke with the engineers, ate in the common halls, and even laughed once, a soft sound that startled everyone, including herself. Kor followed them everywhere, his presence no longer just protective but joyful. He often curled around Lyra while she slept or nudged Elira gently when she grew too serious. Then came the day the first human ship arrived. It was small, battered, and flying a patched flag of Earth, but it carried no weapons, only supplies, and a single passenger, an old woman named Maeve who had led the Mars resistance for 20 years. She stepped onto the platform, her eyes wide with disbelief, then filled with tears. When she saw Lyra, "You did it," she whispered. "We did it together." "Lyra," said smiling. Maeve looked at Elira, then bowed deeply. Not out of fear but respect. Elira did not stop her this time. She simply nodded and offered her hand. That night a feast was held. Not the stiff, formal kind, but a true celebration. Humans and Velthari, sharing food stories and songs. For the first time in history, the citadel echoed with laughter. But the true test came when Prince Dane returned. Not with a fleet this time, but alone in a small shuttle, his armor gone, his face marked by burns and shame. He landed without permission and walked to the main gate where Elira and Lyra stood waiting. "I come to surrender," he said, his voice hollow. "Why?" Elira asked. "Because I was wrong," he said, looking at Lyra. "You showed me that strength is not in conquest, but in connection. I have seen the arrays awaken. I have seen my own people question the Empire for the first time. I cannot unsee it." Elira studied him, then nodded. "You may stay, but not as a prince, as a witness." He bowed his head and stepped aside. His presence was a reminder that change was possible even in the hardest hearts. As weeks turned to months, the alliance grew human. Outposts linked with Valthari stations, guardian arrays stood watch over trade routes, and children on distant worlds learned stories of the dragon who flew with stars in his scales and the princess who chose love over silence. But the most important moment came on a quiet evening. Much like the first, Elira stood before the court, not on the high balcony, but in the grand hall. Lyra, beside her core at their feet, she took Lyra's hand and spoke clearly for all to hear. "I was born to guard this place, but I choose to share it with her, not because she saved us, but because she saw me when no one else did." The court bowed, not out of duty but out of respect, and the stars above burned brighter than ever, far away on a newly rebuilt station near the asteroid belt. A child pointed to the sky. "Look," she said, "the dragon is flying again." And indeed, Kor soared through the void, his wings catching starlight, his heart full. The war was not over, but hope had won its first true battle. And in the heart of the princess of the starlit spire, something once frozen now bloomed like a starflower in spring, simple, quiet, and unbreakable.